All right, what's up, folks? Compile Swift episode here. Another special one with someone I have been trying to get for a long time, and he has very graciously helped me out here with some timing issues, because we're going to talk about one of my favorite apps, and I'm sure it's an app you all know as developers, and if you don't, then shame on you. You should by the end of the episode, because it's going to make your life so much better. I got Antoine with me today for I'm going to say RocketSim fame, but so many things, right? Hey, Antoine, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me over. I feel honored to be here and talk about the thing that I love the most as well, So, yeah, happy to be here.
Great, thank you. So we're going to dive right into this because we got so much to cover. So, RocketSim, I describe it to people as kind of, the iOS simulator we all deserve, right?
Yeah.
is the way that I describe it. But please, we're going to dive into the features in that here, but give people an overview of what the app is, and how it works and what it does, because I think you'll probably do it so much better justice than I do, because I'll probably just gush about all the features that I love on it. So go for it.
Well, honestly, I struggle always to explain what RocketSim does, because there's no single thing that it really does, right? And you ask 10 users and everyone gives you a different explanation, because it's kind of like fitting your workflow as a developer, and it makes the things you do easier. But if you're working on an app with location support, you will tell that RocketSim is great for simulating the location in the simulator. But if you're often testing network conditions, you would probably say like, hey, the simulator airplane mode is really a game changer for me. And so there's like different, I would say, major features that you can't find in the default Xcode simulator, that I'm adding. And my end goal with it, which maybe describes it the best, is to make you as an engineer more productive, allowing you to spend more time on features instead of just making sure your debug setup is working as expected.
Yeah, I think that's a real good description right there, because there is, what I like about it too is the interface is nice and simple, and very easy to use. But the more you look, the more you find those things like the airplane mode and those toggles that are in there. And I'm sure other people have been there too. For me as well, being a left-handed person, trying to do you're in the simulator and you're using the mouse or a touchpad and you're trying to do the swipe up to get into the options to turn on and off things like airplane mode and dark and light mode and all of those kind of things, can be an exercise in frustration when you're trying to swipe on this virtual screen. And so having those buttons in there is great. Definitely for me, one of the sort of parts of the app that I use the most is the screenshots. And I sort of want to start there because, as we all know, to make a fantastic app is one thing. To make a fantastic app and put it in the App Store and have people pay attention to it, and also have good screenshots for documentation and everything else is a real challenge. And let's talk about how that works, because you can do static images, capture video, animated GIF, those kind of things, but they look real nice. We can all do that sort of standard desktop screen capture or the capture from within the simulator. But I kind of feel this takes it to a whole new level. So sort of what inspired you to sort of look at this and go, I can do better?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I think 10 minutes before we started this recording, I was in the middle of RocketSim 11, revisiting the whole recording screenshot capturing system to also support Apple Watch, the new Vision simulator. And on top of that, a lot of new features that work in relation to touches and such. But to take it back before we go into all the new features that I'm working on, when I started working on RocketSim, there was no option to create a screenshot from the simulator or to create recordings as we can today in the simulator. I'm using SimCTL, SimControl, which is like a command line tool And we had the options there, but it was not really easy to use, right? You need to open the terminal and you need to know which command to type before you could create a video recording. And I was showing off my features while I was working on my day-to-day job at WeTransfer to the designers, you know, like, hey, I implemented this new feature, check it out. But, you know, it was not fast enough, so I wanted to improve that workflow. So I started to implement a recording feature in such a way that it's easy accessible, right? For those that don't know, you have the simulator window, and RocketSim is kind of like a floating window next to your simulator that follows along. And you can press a button record and it will record instantly. But just recording was not enough for me. You often try to add bezels around a screenshot. Or even better, I couldn't do it without RocketSim, is adding bezels around a video. And then eventually I was like, wait, the designers can't really follow along where I drag or where I touch. So maybe let's add touches as well. And so on. And then I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if you could add audio recording? That's not something the simulator can do. So, and that's actually an issue I opened in 2021, and I fixed it this year, January, when Screen Capture Kit became available. You know, it felt amazing to finally fix that after 2 years. But yeah, altogether, if you put that all stacked on top of it, you are now able to create recordings with support for portrait landscape, show touches, add bezels, change the background color, the frame color, have audio to it. You know, it's quite a bunch. And yeah, I think that all together made it possible for me to really show off the features I'm working on to my colleagues, or maybe on Twitter or any other social platforms.
Such a game changer for me because, you know, I come from years and years back, you know, a designer background. And so, you know, doing like the screen capture and then editing the screen capture and so on was something that was kind of just a general workflow for me. But when it came to sort of becoming a mobile developer in general, you know, I realized and said to myself, wait a minute, I am spending way too long making these screen captures, right? And like you say, you know, you take the picture, or you take the picture of your desktop, you crop it down. Now you got to go find the right bezel frame for the device that you want, put it in there, fit it, do everything else, and then export it. And so when I found your app, I was like, oh yeah, this is, you know, it's one of those moments where you're like, thank goodness someone solved this problem. And then you suddenly realize all the pain you had been going through, you know, unnecessarily. And then, like you say, on top of the video too, it's like, oh yeah. And then I was using I won't name it, but I was using a third-party tool to do my screen captures, just to get things like the finger touches, the simulated touches, and everything else. And that's that's really useful. And folks, don't underestimate how cool that is, because, you know, especially if you think like you're doing onboarding screens, onboarding videos, things like that. And you know, we all do the thing, right? You know, oh, there's some text that says tap this icon in the top right corner or something. But to show that touch communicates it so much easier and so much more conveniently to people. You know, you've solved the language problem, right? We all know the go there and touch that. So, you know, that really is a big feature. And, you know, something else that I only recently started using, and I'm ashamed of myself because I only recently started doing this. And I know it's you know, they're sort of, I'm going to say relatively new, but they're relatively new to me at least. The grid and especially the ruler as well. So talk about talk about sort of the, you know, the ideas where you came up for like the ruler and the grid, which really is super useful for checking my layouts as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you know, like RocketSim to me is also an answer to the energy I want to put into my personal projects, right? Like I really love working on it, and I started developing like so RocketSim has a debugging feature for myself, which kind of like draws the screen rect of the simulator, so I know where to locate the touches and calculate them percentual. You know, like it's like a background story of how it works, but I suddenly realized, like, okay, so I know exactly where the simulator is positioned. And when I knew that, that's when I started to show the window next to the simulator. But eventually I was also like, wait a second, wouldn't it be awesome if you can show like a grid on top of the simulator, which you can use to align elements? So I was working on that, and it's a simple Swift UI view that I put on top of that view that I already had. Put a few dividers, you know, like horizontally and vertically, and I had a grid, and I had a new feature, and that was awesome. And then I started thinking, maybe I can add rulers to it. So I added that. I recently added distance, so you can show the distance between rulers. I'm not sure if you know.
Yeah, I found that
pretty awesome.
I found it by accident, and I'm like, wait, what's this? And then I'm like, ooh, I needed that.
Yeah. I'm waiting for TipKit, you know, so I can actually explain that to you. But originally, like the whole comparing feature started by there was an app called Flawless app, which was also a simulator tool, which really inspired me because they did awesome things which I couldn't really understand. You know, I think I can say I'm like a simulator expert, but I couldn't really follow along. So I got in touch with the developer, and we had some fun chats, and eventually it was bought by another company, and unfortunately they decided to not continue development, so there's no Flawless app anymore. But that comparison feature, I loved it, right? So what do you do if it's not there anymore? And you have the possibilities? You try to build it yourself. So that's actually the first thing that I implemented before rules and grids even, that really, you know, makes a difference for many that have to implement a design pixel perfectly.
Yeah, you know, I'm glad you bring up the Flawless app because, you know, I was lucky that when they were building that, they reached out to me and they're like, hey, you want to beta test it and give us feedback? And I was like, yes, I do. Absolutely, yes, I do. And I remember, I can't remember who it was now that bought it, but I remember, you know, after working with them and they were saying, you know, it had been bought, and I was like, okay, well, you know, it's kind of one of those, this is fine, and then it went away, and I'm like, this is not fine, you know. No. So I'm glad that you were able to, you know, talk with them about it, because of course, at least for me, that was a natural comparison. You know, pardon the pun, that was not intended for the comparison tool, because it was great. I could load up, and like with yours now, you know, load up an image, right? Load up that concept art that we'd come up with in Sketch or Figma or wherever, and now match my layout to it. And that's a, you know, it's a nice feature that just saves you, you know, anything that saves you like flicking between a couple of apps or a couple of screens, you know, is a big deal. And I recently found the magnifier as well. And
pretty cool.
I was having some fun with it, because for folks who don't know, at the bottom there's a switch that I think, if I remember rightly, it's like bind to device or bound to device. And I was like, I wonder what happens if I switch that off. And I'm like, ooh, I'm now zooming my whole desktop. And I'm like, this is great. This is great. And I do want to mention one little thing that you may not have realized you've done, but at least for me, this is also a relaxation tool, because for folks who don't know it, take the simulator window, and I'm actually doing it right now. Take the simulator window and then just move it around the screen. And you have this nice little floating effect that sort of follows it and puts it by the side, and you're like, ooh, this is fun, you know.
Yeah. So it's actually a funny story, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I was in Singapore this year at iOS Conf SG, a great conference, by the way. And I was chatting with Adam Bell, and I'm not sure if you know him and if you follow him along, but he is really into animations. He works at Netflix, and you know, he has great knowledge there. And we were chatting about RocketSim, and what I like the best is when people don't use RocketSim, because I'm like, okay, I need you to start using RocketSim. That's my next goal, right? What do I need to change to make you use RocketSim? Yeah. So we started discussing, and we talked a bit about ideas and search, and he was like, oh man, you know what you should do? You should use a spring animation. You do it like this and that, and then you know, it should follow the simulator nicely. And I was like, okay, spring animation, right? You know, okay. Where do I start? And I think before the end of the day, he shared me a sample project with a code that I could use. And I think on the plane back to Amsterdam, I implemented it, and I was like, wow, damn, I should, you know, add more animations to it. Also based on his great presentation there, by the way, where he really showed off like how animations can, you know, really level up your experience in the app. So there's all kinds of little animations that I added since, but definitely this one is the most impressive one, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun, you know, because it becomes one of those things where you're like, can I trip this up somehow? What if I do this really quickly? And you're like, no, it's keeping up. And like, you know, like you say, those little things, like, you know, when you rotate the simulator and it finds its new home and things like this. And they just, I love those little things like this in tools that give you that moment where you just sit and smile and go, oh, that's cool. You know? Because it is.
It's challenge, by the way.
Oh, I can well imagine, because I was thinking about it. This was the thing. I was like, you know, even with the rotation and the movement, I'm like, that's a lot of complications and a lot of calculations, and also checking, like, which way did it go? Where is it now? You know?
And to me, it was a classic example where I hit a certain performance wall. You know, like at a certain level, you just add new SwiftUI views. You don't really think about the drawing performance. You know, like I'll wait till the performance hits and then I'll dive in. And now suddenly I had to, you know, be buttery smooth in terms of like animating from position X to Y. And there I realized like my drawing was not optimized at all. I was redrawing the whole side window constantly, which, you know, the first version of that window following along was not following along, you know.
Not pretty.
No. So yeah, that was a pretty fun flight to Amsterdam, I can tell you.
It was probably like that first time we all use SwiftUI and you put in like a spacer or something and you're like, where'd it go? I know it's here somewhere, but where did it go? Yeah, that's interesting, and that's funny too, because, you know, like I say, a lot of this tool, for the listeners and the viewers, you know, a lot of this is about making you more efficient and giving you the things that you need there without having to switch tools, without having to stop and start and do all these things for just some of the, you know, those simple questions of, did I get my layout right? Or what's wrong here? You know, why does this look like it's aligned, but it's not? Which is why I love those guides and being able to drag those guides to the position. You know, even sometimes I kind of treat them a little bit in apps like yours and everywhere else that has these as like a live ruler, right? It's like, okay, when I used to do my designs on paper, and sometimes I still do, you grab the ruler and it's like, are those level? And I can just pull down a guide very quickly and check. I'm like, yep, I'm good to go, you know, and things like that. But it is also, you know, there's a nice, the way I can describe it for folks, and the easiest way is to say, go get it. We're going to put all the links in the show notes and try it out. But, you know, there's also things like an accessibility tab with the convenience of just hitting the toggle to turn on and off whichever combination you want to check right there. And you know, and yes, you can go up into the simulator menu and do your best to try and find some of these things. But it is another one of those of, you know, when you realize someone said, yeah, but what about if I just give you a list next to the simulator and you do it right there, right?
So this one is interesting, right? Like the options are actually available within Xcode, right into Xcode. But the thing that happens is, you know, you're working in a simulator and you want to, you know, invert coolers, for example. So you go into Xcode, but Xcode becomes the frontmost application and the simulator is gone. And then you do the switch and then you need to go back to the simulator. It's a small difference compared to what RocketSim does, but RocketSim allows you to stay in your flow, right? Like you can switch those toggles and nothing changes. You can immediately see it happening. And that to me are examples of what I want to achieve, right? Like it's those small things that keeps you in the flow that might make you more productive and actually help you to get to the goal you want to reach for that day. So yeah, it's a small but I think important addition to RocketSim.
You know, having those, you know, like for accessibility, for example, having it right there and that easy to check these things, I feel is more, you know, it makes a developer more likely to use them because you're there and you're like, oh, I should just check that, right? You know, even something like the dynamic font sizing that I hope a lot of people are using because I've fallen foul of not using it and then discovering to my horror when someone ramps up the font size on a small screen and you're like, whoa, that looks ugly. So having them right there, developers and even testers, whoever it may be, is more likely to check and use and take advantage of these things, which of course is nothing but a good thing for the app, and especially a good thing for the user. So it's that psychological benefit of, what does that look like?
Yeah, you touch upon an interesting point. So you might think RocketSim is only used by developers, but I actually have quite a few QA engineers, right, that test applications that reached out to me for recently. For example, they used it to create videos, and if you do like a side edge swipe to pop a view, that touch isn't visible. So if I could add that, but the interesting part to me was that it's a QA engineer, and I was like, oh wow, they use it too. And for them, those environment toggles, make total sense if you can easily drag and change the size and such. But yeah, maybe there are engineers that don't even know those options exist. Imagine you just getting started developing. Yep. I hope you already installed RocketSim at that stage.
Yep.
If not, maybe consider it. But you might use RocketSim to actually find out about those options. That's a really good point.
Again, something that's sort of underlying here is taking advantage of the features. I'm sure a lot of people look at RocketSim or tools like this and go, oh, it's a screen capture tool. It's like, well, it's more of a sanity check than just screen capture, because it's a good way of finding things before you send it to the store and get that rejection and wonder why. Take the 5 minutes, go through the options, right? It really is that quick. And I can remember my life before I found these tools, and it was you very quickly learn the shortcut for the run in Xcode, stop, switch to the thing, rotate the simulator, and all of these things, and then a tool comes along and you're like, wow, this has really helped me out here, and so I cannot stress it enough, and folks, please understand. Part of the reason that I wanted to talk about RocketSim was because of how much it changed my workflows. And for those who don't know, it's like, look, firstly, I don't understand how you don't know, right? But secondly, it's like, trust me, just do this today and you can thank me tomorrow.
Yeah. But this is an interesting challenge for me, right? Like, I mean, I've quite some followers on Twitter, but if I look at the number of followers and the number of active users for RocketSim, there's so many users that I can still convince to use it, right? Even though I have a reach, it's challenging. And then there's a certain moment that one decides to start installing RocketSim, and I'm tracking using Amplitude anonymously, and I'm super hooked to looking at those statistics, right? So I got my onboarding flow, and then what I do is I kind of like monitor each stage of the onboarding, and I try to see where somebody drops off. And the interesting part to me is I think 40% of those that start the trial don't do anything with the side window. Some don't even see the side window. 40%. I'm like, that's insane. So they will probably never decide to continue that trial because they don't even know what it is. So I'm still trying out new things to really educate them. And I'm now thinking about maybe really pushing a video in front of their face like, this is RocketSim. Make sure to continue your journey, right? And I force launched the simulator right after the sales view, so I know for sure the side window will show up for them, and they kind of are maybe more likely to try it out. But yeah, I think that's a general challenge with the products we develop, right? Like, how do you ensure that one understands the whole concept of your app? And for a health and fitness app, it might be much easier because it's a core concept. But for a thing like RocketSim, where there's so many tools and so many different engineers, like, how can I kind of like predict what they need? And this is an interesting look ahead, right? So one thing I ask you during the onboarding is like, give access to recent builds. It's a core feature I need to show you things like deep link testing or location testing. All those kind of things work with your bundle identifier for the recent builds you have. But what I can do without touching any private data, right, is determine whether your recent build supports location. And if it does, you might be more interested in location simulation features. So what if I change the onboarding and show you a video how location simulation works, right? Maybe that makes you more likely to like RocketSim. And those kind of level of thoughts I actually have right now.
I like that. I like that way of thinking about it, because I never thought about onboarding as, you know, for me, when I'm doing onboarding with apps and that, you know, and I'm sure for many users as well, you know, the common experience that makes sense is put a few screens up front, or a video, something like that. You know, you sort of swipe through them, giving them the, like, here's the major things you need to know to not instantly hate my app, right, you know. And then once they've got through that, I like this idea of, hey, I notice you've been using location a lot. Let me tell you about this, right? There's this tool here you can use and things like that. That's a really good idea. I like that. Yeah.
And another related improvement I did recently is a new sales view that resulted in a 300 plus conversion improvement.
Nice.
And the funny thing is, like, many say, like, keep your sales view simple, to the point, you know, make it really clear which buttons to tap and such. But since I got so many features, I decided to go to, like, they often use it with web products. You know, those pricing tables where you have a long list of features, and research shows that for many of those websites, it converts much better, because those that doubt, they start scrolling through the list of features and eventually they know much more about your product. But it's also in the end more convincing because it shows a more overall picture of what you have to offer to them. So after I implemented that variant of the sales view, you know, it was an incredible increase. And ever since, I think my running trials doubled, which is quite amazing.
I'm gonna say, because I actually like that detailed view that you have, because I know for me, I've been there more times than I like. You find an app that you like, and you know, whether it's a desktop tool, a mobile tool, whatever it may be, and then you go to, like, okay, you've convinced me, I'm gonna purchase this, right? You know, and then you go to that view in some apps, and it gives you this very limited, almost like, you know, like, hey, this is going to cost you $10. Not, you know, and maybe they'll tell you a couple of points of what you're going to get, but you're sort of left wondering, you know, what am I, you know, psychologically, what am I going to get for this, right? You know, do I even need to give you the $10, right? So actually, I like that view that you have that has that checklist, because I think, you know, that psychological viewpoint of when you're scrolling down through something and you're seeing that one column's got an awful lot more checkboxes than the other one, now you're like, well, I want to be one of those people, right? I want to be in that column. And so I actually really appreciate that detailed view you put in there. And I'm so glad to hear that it's working out, because I would imagine, and I can understand, you know, first you're like, ooh, people are going to want this complicated view. But I think, especially when you're talking something like developer tools, you hope that they're doing their homework and really looking into these things. And they're not going to, you know, it's not one of those, like, instant purchase, like 99 cents and forget it kind of things where they probably, you know, didn't even read it, right? And I think with developer tools and that, I hope that everybody stops and pays attention and looks at the details and says, you know, what's the difference between the two, and also if there's a particular key feature they're looking for, excuse me, you know, where's my check mark, right? That's the one that I need, you know. And just having those simple columns too, because we've all been there with the web products and things like that. You go there and there's like 5 columns and you're like, I have no idea which one is the one that I need, you know. So thank you for doing that.
And a small addition I added as well is, like, in the footer, I kind of mentioned, like, hey, I'm an indie developer for this app. By buying that subscription, you're actually supporting me directly, right? It's not that you pay a certain big company or such. have no clue whether that had a positive impact as well, but I figured, maybe that buys a little more, goodwill or anything like that.
Yeah, I hope it does,
nice.
because I'm always, telling folks in my, when I'm doing my live streams or my podcasts or just showing other people, I'm always saying to them, look, support the people that make the tools that enable you to do what you're doing, right? And I get it. Yes, we're all like, when it's a big company, you're like, I don't know, you're like, I feel like I'm just, giving in to them. But when it's an indie developer or something like that, or a small company, support them, right? And also, along with that, give feedback, right? There's, it is so important. If you're using, I try to do this as much as I can. If I'm using something and I find a feature that's changed my world, I reach out to give good feedback, right up there with the, hey, I got a problem, because you want people to know that the time and effort they put into something absolutely paid off. So I really do hope that it did make a difference for you and that folks do it, because, at the end of the day, tools like this, they change the way that we work as developers and reward the people that have saved you that time and pain.
Totally. Yeah.
Is there anything else that we've not covered here in RocketSim that you want to discuss?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting to look ahead, right? So one thing I do is I really listen to the voice of my users, because there's so many things I love to build that I risk building something that's not per se what my users want to build. I think it's a general problem to have, but I really want to make sure that the time that I have, I spend well, because most of the things I actually like building. So it's a matter of, picking the one that's the highest priority based on user feedback. So the benefit I have is that I'm working with developers. So I actually have a GitHub repository where one can open an issue, request a feature and such. And inside RocketSim, I have a roadmap view that's actually open source. So if you want to add that to your app, that's possible too. But it allows you to vote on what I believe are the next prominent features that I want to build. And based on that, I kind of like set a roadmap for the next coming quarter or two. And right now, I'm already doing beta testing with RocketSim 11, which will, like I said before, include watchOS and VisionOS support for those simulators. But another thing I'm working on, which you might actually appreciate, is the fact that touches will be visible constantly. So it kind of like moves with your mouse. So it's not appearing, disappearing, but it will constantly be visible. And I'm also working on like adding a little scale down, scale up animation when you do the touch.
Oh, okay.
So I really want to like level up that quality of recordings, and you'll be surprised even more when you see the touch constantly visible. It really makes a difference to me, at least. And it's challenging. I'm learning a lot about keyframe animations, and I don't know. It's a super fun project.
I do secondly, like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You'll sure be able to try it out soon. The other thing I wanted to mention is many requested, so many apps are localized, right? But if you now want to test your app in different languages, let alone in different time zones, that's super challenging on the simulator. And with that, I mean, if you want to change the language of the simulator itself, it needs to restart, which is time consuming. The time zone you can, I think, only change if you change the time zone of your Mac itself. So that's also not really helping. And what I do when I get such requests, because the users request like, hey, can't we change the language from RocketSim, or can we change the time zone from RocketSim? And I found a way that probably allows you to do it by just relaunching your app alone. So that's another feature I really want to implement soon, because if you're in a workflow of testing in several languages, or maybe having a calendar app or anything related to dates, being able to switch time zones immediately, maybe even by changing the simulator location and do it all together. You switch location to New York, and then you switch it to France, and the language becomes France, and the time zone becomes from France. You know, like that's another feature I have in mind, which probably won't make it into 11, but maybe 11.1. But yeah, I just want to make those users excited about it. To expect it coming soon.
You know what? You may not realize it, but actually, that's huge, and I'll tell you why. Because off the top of my head, I can think of 4 apps that I work on in the day job. All of them have multiple languages and massive amount of countries around the world. So actually, that's a killer feature right there. So it'll be worth the wait, because the apps that I work on, off the top of my head, 3 languages and counting, right? 3 localized languages, including, like you said, date, time, and currency, huge parts of those applications. And it is also something that, again, making that localization more accessible to the developer and easier to work with. Hopefully it'll convince more folks to, think about that, do that, right? I know for my own personal apps, I'm guilty of just doing them in English because it's a side project, and I admit that I've just been lazy. But yes, something like that would be huge. So thank you for that. And actually, I want to say I saw, I think it was a Twitter post from you, a few of them about the watch, and I was like, ooh, that's cool too. But I guess I'm going to have to go there and ask about it, because, Vision OS and the simulator on there, I'm sure at this point, many people listening or watching, developers, we've all done it, right? Pulled down the Vision OS simulator, run the app quickly, and some of us have gone, well, that's nice, and moved on, knowing that we'll have to come back to it at some point in the future. So I would imagine this is going to give you a whole unique set of problems to solve right there from a simulator perspective, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was actually fun for me to try out, right? Like you try out your app on the simulator, I try out RocketSim next to the simulator. It was funny, right? Like how does it even work? And it turns out that pretty much of the simulator is similar to the other simulators. Like the environment toggles, they worked right away. The overlay with the grids worked right away as well, but I have the problem of the 3D dimension, so the grid doesn't really make any sense there anymore. Yeah, I guess. So I made some decisions of hiding certain features that I thought like they don't really make any sense on the Vision simulator. But yeah, it was an interesting journey for sure. Yeah. So one thing that I would love to explore in the future, right? Like if you imagine developing with Vision on your hat, actually using the device, right? So don't think in simulators, think in the actual device. And if you use Xcode in that view, that's amazing, right? You have Xcode, you have also multiple code windows next to you. You just turn your head and you see a second window, that ID. I kind of want to be in that space with RocketSim. So that means a Vision OS app. So not like a simulator attached app, but really on Vision OS, you will have RocketSim as a window next to Xcode. That's kind of like a step further, so to say. But it's yet to be seen what I can do and how it really works. But in fact, I'm also thinking out loud now, by the way. But like in a way, it's similar to what I do today, only attaching it to Xcode instead of like on the simulator. And I'm thinking about showing like statistics or something like that. I'm not sure yet what to really do, but I just want to really explore that space. I believe there's room for developer tools in that space.
You want to cover or talk about? And I should tell folks, we're going to put links in the show notes for all of this stuff, right? Go to avanderleave.com because you also have a wealth of content on there that I think is super helpful and very interesting to developers as well. But is there anything else I've not covered here or brought up that you want to dive into?
Well, yeah, I guess if one of the listeners decides to use RocketSim and decides to not continue using it or not feeling convinced, I would love to get in touch, right? Like, I will not force you to use it, but I just want to learn from your experience and see how I can improve. Obviously, also feel free to let me know if you found it great and you started using it, or if you miss any features. But yeah, I just want to open the door for getting in touch. That's one thing.
So we've covered a lot in this episode, but I really strongly hope that we have convinced you that either A, you're a RocketSim user already and you've learned about something you didn't know about, and you're excited about the future features like I am. And they're out in the public now, so just saying. But and if you're not a RocketSim user, yeah, that's it, no pressure, yeah. And if you're not a RocketSim user, I hope you will be, right? Please go away, try this, right? Again, we'll put links in the show notes for everything. Try it out. And I will say too, I do want to add this, the price for the Pro version, I think is extremely reasonable, not only for the tool that you're getting, but, again, as we mentioned earlier, as developers, support other developers, right? And, I'm just going to say, just go get the Pro version. Trust me on this, right? Once you've used it, if you use it for 10 minutes, you'll be like, okay, you convinced me, go sign up. So, Antoine, thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time out. I know how busy you are, and greatly appreciate, us being able to align schedules for this, because I so desperately wanted to tell you how much I love this app. And I was like, I'll do a podcast. That's the easy way to do this. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Tell folks where they can find you. Again, we'll put links in the show notes. But for those maybe listening in the car or something, give them all the details, please.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for inviting me. This was a lot of fun, and I'm always happy to talk about RocketSim. People can find me on avenderly.com, as you said before. I would definitely encourage them to follow me, follow my newsletter as well. It's a weekly newsletter full of Swift curated content from the community. If you're on Twitter, it's TwanNL, TWANNL. And LinkedIn is also possibly a place you want to follow me. But, it's all findable by going to avenderly.com. And I'm pretty sure those links you can find in the show notes.
All right, folks. So that's what we've got in this edition. I always like to highlight really awesome developer tools that make a difference in my life, and I believe will make a difference in other people's lives as well. Again, we'll put all the links in the show notes. But that's what we got for you. If this has been helpful, you know what to do, all the usual things, right? But mostly, the most important thing, reach out and say thank you to everybody. So that's it, folks. We will see you in the next episode. Thank you.